Welcome to the Southeastern Europe discussion event. Very few words about me as moderator of today's discussion. My name is Teresa Albano. I work as Economic Affairs Officer at the Office of the Coordinator of OSCE Economic and Environmental Activities. It takes a bit to say the name of my office. In a short, I work for the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and my portfolio deals with narrowing socio-economic disparities, which includes migration governance and human capital development. I believe that maybe by chance, by absolute chance, the Southeastern Europe chose me as moderator because I am exactly dealing with the topics that have been developed in the articles that are going to be discussed today. I just come from a tour in the Balkans. I started with Tirana on the 2nd of December, then Belgrade, Sarajevo, Skopje. I just came back yesterday. And my discussion was, can we benefit and look at migrants as beneficial for the development of the region? And how can we counteract brain drain and skilled use out migration from the region? Can we consider these crises, so-called migration crisis, an opportunity for socio-economic development? And how can we counteract depopulation in the region, taking, for example, taking inspiration from examples in other countries, such as, for example, Italy, because I'm Italian by nationality. So maybe if you already had a look at the titles of the articles that are going to be presented today, these terms may ring a bell. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the first author, who is Anna Krasteva, Doctor Honoris Causa of University of Lille, France, Professor of Political Sciences and Director of CERMES, New Bulgarian University, President of the Policy and Citizens Observatory, Migration, Digitalization, Climate. Some of her last publications are Citizens, Activism, and Solidarity Movements, Contending with Populism, Bulgarian Migration Paradox, Thinking Under Quarantine. She teaches at the University of Sarajevo and the University of Bologna. Anna Krasteva is president and member of numerous international scientific boards. So Anna, I would like to give you the floor to present, and I will give you 5 minutes, your article, Balkan Migration Crisis and Beyond. Please, Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Marco, for uploading the presentation. Next slide, please. Here is Serbia, where it is a war, sanctions, Kosovo. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, I also have to let new people in, but can you see the screen?
The screen, yes, but not the presentation. Here is Serbia, whether it is a war, sanctions, Kosovo, it mostly works the same way. People say the crisis in Serbia, it is not the crisis, it is simply Serbia. My students adore counting how many Serbia are there in the Balkans, in Bulgaria, and everywhere in Europe. If I took this quotation, it is from a refugee in Belgrade. It is because in a very nice way, it mixes three powerful messages. So the omnipresence and the multiplicity of crises in the Balkans, the systemic affinity between migration and crisis, and the embeddedness of crisis in the national, regional, ethnic, etc. identities. Next, please. Quite ambitious, I would say, article with a triple objective. So for theoretical innovations in almost all, let's say, parts. I developed quite a new, let's say, innovative idea of crisis, which I apply in this article, let's say, to migration. So based on that one original typology of Balkan migration crisis, and of course, let's say, how to go beyond the crisis and also to measure the potential, the crisis potential versus the anti-crisis potential. Next, please. Conceptualizing the crisis very, very rapidly, so that it has been developed in a variety of articles. Here I would summarize, let's say, my major idea with a very provocative statement. If the crisis did not exist, they would have been invented by populist leaders. In the original, it is post-communist leaders, but not to make it too complicated for a very short presentation, I'm replacing here with the populist leaders, so that you do see it is. I rephrase Sartre's famous statement, if the Jews did not exist, they would have been invented by anti-Semites. So the question, of course, is why to create crises when there are so many other crises. Next slide. In 5 minutes, you will not have, of course, the answer, but let's say just to compare the two crises. So the first is what the two migration types of crisis, so that the first is the so-called classic crisis, which is very clearly expressed in unprecedented increase in migration flows and institutional incapacity of managing them. And the other one is almost the opposite, so that not so many objective but mainly symbolic characteristic, very liquefied temporality, because the first one there is a beginning, top and end, more or less, while this one, okay, so could emerge at whatever time, and it is expressed in, let's say, the agency is also different, not anymore the institutions, but populist leaders who create migration crisis where objectively there is no decrease of migration flows, but increase of populist discourses. Next. So how to cover it is extremely ambitious to cover the whole region, so that a typological entry, let's say, for mapping the migration profile of the region, I choose the very famous and insightful typology of temporalities of Fernand Braudel, which I apply, let's say, to migration, and of course to Balkan migration, and it allows to see a very changing profile of the region according to the temporality zoom you apply. So both the migration profile and the dominant type of migration change according to the temporality lens you apply. Yeah, next slide. So here is the summary, the conclusion, so that I make a distinction between 4 different migration crises, the 3 of them, and I of course distinguish according to temporality, origin, destination, so nationality of migrants, etc. But the 3 are expression of those objectives, so classic normal crisis. The 4th one is the populist, or what I call post-democratic crisis. Next. when there is crisis, there should be post-crisis, so that, and of course, post-crisis management, and so that I developed this part with two completely different approaches and cases. So the first is extremely interesting case of the policy on foreign fighters repatriation in Kosovo. Extremely interesting. In 5 minutes, we do not enter into any details. Why did I take it? Because it is one of the very rare cases of reversed, let's say, situation of lessons learned. So normally, okay, so EU preaches, or international organizations, let's say, preach how to do migration, migration, integration, and all the other policies. This example, very small one from a very small country and on a very, very, very specific, let's say, type of returnees, so that is an opposite case, because Kosovo dared, very small country of Kosovo dared doing, let's say, with the former foreign fighters, what almost any West European countries didn't, and because of that, all Western European countries and European institutions observe, let's say, this policy experiment. Next slide, and I'm going to end very soon, of course. The second, of course, approach of how to go beyond crisis, and I'm very happy to share that the major policy innovation the last years, especially in Western Balkans, much less so in Eastern Balkans, is the implementation of the policy of the migration development nexus. Engage, enable, empower is a very beautiful summary. It is the slogan, I would say, of the Albanian policy, but all those, they are institutional, legal, different types of policy innovations, but they all express, let's say, this idea of a policy engagement, so that policy contribution, or the contribution of the diaspora to the development of the country of origin, and they illustrate this major policy ambition to change the migration profile of the Balkans. So Teresa likes to have a changing narrative. So the major aim of this policy innovation is to change the narrative and to change the image of Western Balkans from forced migrations or from migration crisis to migration and development nexus. So that's why I would not say they're extremely efficient in terms of outcomes, but in terms of really a new, let's say, type of policy and a very ambitious project of changing the narrative. They are really extremely interesting. And I'm going to conclude, so that very detailed conclusion I will not develop here. So next slide, I'll summarize. So the Balkans remain a torn country, so that facing opposite trends. So migration crises, several of them, and different types. So not only migration flows, but also those constructive crises versus the migration development nexus. Okay, those two types of crises, so that we have at least one of them at any moment, and these two different images. So securitized migration as a national threat and ontological, connected to ontological insecurity, versus migration connected to reconstruction, post-conflict reconstruction, prosperity, integration, and development of the region. And the real last one, which goes, the real last one, which goes beyond the conclusion and also beyond the article, but I'm an art fan, and I would like, let's say, to offer a small gift, symbolic art gift to everybody, to the audience, so that these are photos from a teacher in Sarajevo, who one day, or several days started seeing refugees, let's say, crossing the street, and so that she got inspired of taking pictures and publishing on Instagram, and she got a great success. And with these beautiful pictures of amateur photographer, so that I would like to close this very short presentation. Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much for this initial umbrella overview. Still, we are still trapped into this dilemma: real and constructed migration crisis. Migration is a catalyst of national threats, or as a factor for reconstruction and development. But indeed, there are some real worrying trends. And in this regard, I would like to mention the so-called brain drain, which Mirjana Bobić developed in her article titled "The Skilled Youth Out Migration from Serbia in a Developmental Perspective." Indeed, I was discussing in these days with the governments of Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina and North Macedonia, the brain drain of young talents, young educated people from the region. And this is indeed a worrying trend. So I would like to give the floor to Mirjana Bobić, who is a sociologist and a demographer, a professor at the Faculty of Philosophy, and a researcher at the Institute for Sociological Research at the University of Belgrade, Serbia. She has a strong experience in empirical research and field work in socio-economic transformation of Serbian society. Her main fields of interest are social demography, migration, contemporary families, partnership and reproduction, historical demography, population challenges and policies. She has published a great number of papers in leading peer-reviewed journals in the country and abroad. Please, Mirjana, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I hope you hear me well, and I also hope that you see my presentation. Obviously, I can't zoom into one slide, but I have to keep them on the left side flowing, and I will concentrate on this one, which is on the front page. Thank you very much for inviting me. We are in a very hectic period of the year and with so many duties, but I hope I will be up to my task today. What I'm especially interested in is actually the discussion which will follow. Okay, so as Anna said, it's quite difficult to present the main findings and the main points of your article in quite a short time, like for example 5-10 minutes, but I will do my best really to try to concentrate on the focal points. Actually, this paper is a collaborative work of me and my younger colleague, assistant professor Milica Vesković and Željković, which was obviously published in the Southeastern Europe. Actually, the paper is tackling the issue of conceptualizing the out-migration of skilled young people from the Republic of Serbia, but as well as from the region of Western Balkans in the period of post-socialistic transformation and all the challenges related to that. But what is the starting point is actually the obvious that we are living in a world of globalization and transnationalism, and actually the core countries or the leading developed countries in the world are striving to actually hunt talents from the less developed countries, and on the other side, for young men, it's quite normal and natural that he or she wants to improve his knowledges, wants to travel, wants to work in some better professional research, academic, scientific, and so on conditions. So we actually think that it's not only something which is bad, but something which is quite normal for the life trajectory of a young person. Actually, the reason to undertake this our theoretical and empirical research was to try to see how is it possible to have a stance on this phenomenon, not only from the pessimistic neo-Marxist perspective, let's say, but also from some neoclassical or more optimistic perspective, actually as a win-win-win, triple win strategy for both the destination, origin, and the very migrant and his family. In that vein, the main research question was actually how can the standing countries such as Serbia take advantage of this skilled youth out migration, and what policies would be effective on that end. The theoretical discussion of the first part in the paper is quite large. We actually tried to disentangle various concepts that cover the living in a globalized world. It means, first of all, globalization, then transnationalism and diaspora. Now, I'm not here mentioning the first part of the article, which is not dealing only with the data, only some data partially, but it's more like sort of illustration to see how the phenomenon is advancing ever since 1960s, not only in the less developed countries, but also in the developed countries like Great Britain, like Germany, like all other countries. That it is the phenomenon related to the acceleration and diversification and huge mobility actually living in the world called age of migrations. So, as I said, I'm not going to go back to this data and some research that from the Western Balkans that showed main motives for skilled out migration, but I will now focus more on our theoretical discussions and empirical research that in a way boost our theoretical underpinnings. We were actually thinking about how can we deploy the ways to transform brain drain, brain waste, which is obvious from these countries and like Serbia, into brain gain and brain circulation. And actually we understand that it is possible under one wider migration and development nexus. And then we have a very long elaboration. What does it actually mean? It's related to the transnationalism, to the network society, to identity, to various activities, and the various policies that should actually enable this transformation, of mobility into the development incentives for both destination, but also for the origin countries. And our empirical findings are actually introduced in order to endorse this theoretical discussion, and we actually present secondary analysis of field works, of field research on transnational entrepreneurship as an example of transnationalism and diaspora, and in the end we give some action and policy related conclusions. The basic approach is actually the network society and the position of the migrants in this overall network society, where actually social networks become a very important resources for the trajectory of a young person, of skilled migrant, because networks actually provide him or her with key resources that alleviate risks and costs of mobility. Then we have the discussion of various authors, some of which are actually Granovetter's distinction in between strong and weak ties, where strong ties actually enable the migrant to settle into the new territory, to find board and lodging, to be settled. And weak ties are actually more important for this skilled youth, because those are the links related to the profession, to mentors, to academia, to business, to enterprises, and so on. And we actually found through the literature and the empirical research that actually at the beginning migrants, educated migrants, are more interested into their professional advancement, not so much interested into the homeland, and actually in a way they distance themselves from that sort of identity. But over time, as they are more advanced in their profession, in their careers, they actually develop much more sense of the belonging, and that's, as we will see later, as we actually showed in the paper, a very important emotional capital, which altogether with their financial resources already accumulated, social resources in terms of links to important, relevant people from their profession, from research, from business, and so on, actually enable them to gradually start thinking about returning home, not only physically, but also virtually, owing to the modern communication, to the means of transportation, fast internet connections, and so on. Transnational migration is also one important concept which we explained here. It is quite different from the diaspora, for example. Transnational migration is actually a pattern of migration where persons, although they move across international borders, settle and establish ongoing social relations in a new state, maintaining social connections with the polity from which they originated. So in a way, transnational migrants are literally persons living across different states and international borders. On the other hand, diaspora, which is important as a sort of source of this emotional and social capital, actually is more related to the multi-site, dense and durable social spaces with one identifiable, even if only imagined, center or a homeland. So unlike transnationalism, which goes over different borders in different states, diaspora is more actually pronouncing or focusing on this identity to the national state and to the feelings of belongings. In that way, actually, this mobility in a modern world is in line with what King, as a leader scholar in migration studies, already pushed forward. That's the idea of the postmodern mobility, which actually goes over binary distinctions like mobility, like out migration, in migration, emigration, immigration, actually forced migrations and economic voluntary migrations, in a way connecting distinct temporalities and distinct territories. Then shortly about our empirical evidence, which actually is proceeding after the theoretical part. We give actually several examples of the field studies. One is transnational entrepreneur, a social actor who mobilize networks, ideas, information, and practices aimed at searching for business opportunities inside multiple social fields and push them to enact various strategies of promotion of business activities and social changes. We give there in the paper several field research among this carried out among these transnational entrepreneurs, where we actually see that they're overcoming obstacles and structural barriers at destination and home country, gradually actually transforming and shifting their business and professional enterprises, companies, basically in IT sector, then managerial things in ethno-business, in culture, and so on, gradually transforming them and bringing them back to their home country and actually living in two different spaces and territories, taking advantage of both places, original destination and origin, and combining, bringing them together. The other idea is about the possibilities of engaging diaspora. It was based on our colleague Jovan Filipović, professor from organizational sciences, who actually defended his PhD in Ljubljana. It was his idea how to enact the networks, professional, scientific, intellectual networks of highly developed, of highly educated immigrants, him being one of the members of diaspora. And one of his original idea was actually modeling the idea of Serbian diaspora virtual university, which is a sort of an online networking, working on the common project, both cyber but also physical space, where experts from different fields of science and research gather together, exchange and activate potential knowledge to design or re-examine old solutions. Actually, we are already witnessing such sort of online possibilities for connecting, networking, for working together on the project, for online teaching, for PhD defenses that go online, like with different commissions from different universities, committees, and so on. So it is something which is obviously quite realistic, except that it should be institutionalized probably better in the future. Finally, and now I'm close to the conclusion, there is also one good idea, which is also a model based on the very robust empirical research, behavior and activities and identities of very many national diasporas in the world, from Chile, from Mexico, from China, from Ireland, from Armenia, Ukraine, from South Africa, and so on, where actually one of the world economic experts, Evgeny Kuznetsov, developed his hierarchy model of the impact of diaspora on the homeland. His initial hypotheses are close to ours. Actually, he says they do possess strong financial and other capitals, remittances, of course, cultural capital, new educations, proactivity, creativity, and so on. Besides that, they are very much related to the homeland in terms of their belonging, identity, and they are actually proactive, so they take different steps in order to produce some changes at the origin place. His model actually encompasses some 5 stadiums, some 5 steps. At the beginning, at the bottom line, this should be the other way around. At the bottom is remittances, like sporadic investment into the families and household in the origin place. When we still don't have some networking and some common activities related to the linked to the homeland, and on the top of this pyramid is actually institutional development of the homeland and the reforms, social, economic, political, and so on. But as he said, in order to come from the first to the 5th stadium, we need to pass these 3 steps in between. Those are collective remittances, hometown associations, investments, and networking. He gives a lot of examples, like Mexican diaspora, which is quite advanced in this field. Then Ukrainians, Armenians, Chinese, and so on. Ireland is also famous for a very successful investment, actually usage of diaspora. But when compared with these countries of post-socialism and Serbia, actually we see that we are still at this first or embryonic, actually, step. Still a lot of things to be done. In the end, quite a brief conclusion, because the time is quite short. What I think is important is to actually give up with this pessimistic moaning of the emigration, because emigration of the youth is here to stay. It's impossible to curb, and it should not be curbed, in my opinion. Young people should be motivated to go and learn and get some improved knowledges and expertise. But what we really need, because the region is affected, it is, in my opinion, one region-wide political debate and even maybe some common actions, at least at the region of Western Balkans. Then, of course, some strengthening networking with diaspora, which needs to be with a much better enforcement, let's say, from the state and from stakeholders. Fostering transnational entrepreneurship. We presented in our articles what do entrepreneurs actually request on the side of future development of these activities. And finally, something which is very much missing, for example, in Serbia, that is that we have a lot of strategies, a lot of documents, a lot of action plans, but nothing is actually implemented or very poorly implemented. So we need obviously stronger implementation and much more even that is a local level policy actions and implementation of various policies, because we actually saw from the research that diaspora and the migrants, transnational entrepreneurs are much more interested into the local region and their neighborhood than in some global macro state project where they don't trust too much. Sorry for my long speech. That's it from my side for the moment.
Thank you so much, Mirjana. Indeed, all these papers are incredibly offering grounds, scientific grounds to my operational work. I was discussing with the government of Serbia, Bosnia, and North Macedonia, a project that I just developed in order to support young startups from the region to leave the region to increase their skills, but then come back while we try to improve an enabling environment for young people to stay, to retain talent. We need an enabling environment. And why? Because indeed, the depopulation is worrying in the whole region and not only in Serbia. And again, we were discussing in North Macedonia trends of depopulation, and the future is indeed gloomy. Although we should not be pessimistic, but in 10 years from now, universities will close because there will be no longer young people to attend university courses. So what can we do in order to increase the school population? And I look at you, Marco Zoppi, in order not to close schools, not to close universities, not to close apotheke, pharmacies, not to close libraries, because the moment we no longer have young people, the moment the local economy and the national economy consequently will collapse. For us as a security organization, OSCE, this is really a worrying trend that we would like to reverse. So Marco, kindly give me additional ideas for my policy discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wish I had solutions, but maybe I have ideas. So let's see. Let's start from there at least. So I'm very glad to present, although briefly, the article that I have co-written together with Jovana Mastilovic, and where we propose a joint, let's say, reflection on the themes of local development, depopulation, and migration, indeed. So we try to put together these two topics to understand if asylum seekers and refugees can contribute to local development, local territorial economic development, and under which circumstances, for example. To do that, we decided to engage in a comparative study, bringing together the cases of Riace in southern Italy and the city of Sjenica in Serbia, southwest Serbia, and we perform a comparison starting from the fact that these are two rather small villages in certain territorial conditions, and I will say a bit more about that later. And as for the former, Riace in Italy, we basically looked at the existing literature, a desk research, and looking at the so-called model of a Riace model of integration, which was kind of renowned at the national and international level for the system of integration of asylum seekers and refugees. I don't have much time to talk about the details. I have to mention also that after the publication of our article, the mayor of Riace has been convicted for irregularities in the way the integration system was run. It's a first instance judgment, which amounts to some 13 years. As the outcome of the verdict, but again, it's a first instance, and it's all very interesting also to look at what are the so-called irregularities, because they link also back to the overall way we understand what should be integration, what are the limits that current laws and policies do place on the integration system. Maybe we'll have time in the Q&A session later, in the discussion session. We'll see, because I cannot go in more details in this part especially. When it comes to Sjenica, we have carried out 15 interviews with representatives of the local government, the international organizations, and NGOs working in the area. And again, we try to understand from these interviews whether there is an opportunity and a political will to integrate the foreigners that are there, potential asylum seekers, as a strategy, as a part of a strategy for territorial development. So in the first part of the article, we briefly set the scene by looking into the relation between migration and insecurity. While there is a growing consensus that migrants at large, this time intended, can contribute to the territorial dynamics where they are, there is also this trend of securitization. We are all familiar with that, with the debate that has been around, especially, let's say, since 2014-15. So there are two faces of the same coin: opportunities on the one hand, and perceived threats to identity, culture, and social fabric of receiving territories. In the second section, we deal with the depopulation in Italy and in Riace more specifically, so in the town that I have mentioned, which is one of the case studies. According to demographic statistics, Italy is going to lose population in the next decades. It's expected that the population will shrink. Riace is a typical example of that speaks for many other villages in Italy, and one could say in Europe. So it has more than half its population since World War II, and it's keep on losing population. And what happened during the Riace system of integration was that actually population went up, both because of the asylum seekers and refugees being hosted there, and also for the economic opportunities that were created by the system itself. So people working the reception, the welcoming, language courses, in workshops and other activities, not to mention also sustainable tourism initiatives that took place, especially during the summer. So this is the context in brief of Riace. And in the next section of the article, we also provide a background of Serbia and Sjenica. When we look at the demographic statistics of Serbia, we probably have an even more alarming trend of depopulation. And the projections said that the population could, the national population could go down from 6,900,000 in 2020 to 6,500,000. So it's by 2041. So it's about -6%, and it could be even worse than in other worst case scenario. And when it comes to Sjenica, it's a small town of around 14,000 inhabitants. It is rather far from main highways. It is surrounded by natural reserves and agricultural opportunities, which is kind of the same context in Riace, and it's also the kind of context I have retrieved also in other researchers when it comes to remote areas, when you have to look for economic opportunities and what are the conditions of marginalization. Very often you have to look at infrastructure, how far are big centers and the kind of services that are provided. So as highlighted by municipality representatives in Sjenica, there is a belief that migrants can contribute to local development. Quite interestingly, we didn't find this narrative of migrants representing threats to security. And also, when it comes to the Muslim background of many migrants and asylum seekers, they did not bring any particular sense of threats, also due to the background of the region itself, where Islam is one of the practiced religion indeed. And at the same time, there are narratives of that migrants themselves do not want to stay in Serbia. This is a direct quotation we had from the field. And it's also an expectation, I would say, from the authorities that these people will not stay. This seems to be the perception around. Some of the fields where there's a lot to be done on both sides. What makes attractive a certain territory and how to correct certain perception that prevents new initiatives to be established. We also found out additional challenges, and here maybe I link back directly to what you were saying, Teresa, that basically the challenges faced by these places are that they are far from main centers. They do suffer from certain centralization of policy making, so they feel distant from where the policies are decided. Sometimes the decision come upon them. This is the impression that I also got from other researchers that I have done, other case studies. So issues of road quality, representation in national fora, lack of a really coordinated plan. These are some of the issues that very often we heard and we found in the literature. So if we should say whether Riace, that has this distributed integration of asylum seekers in the town, whether it is actually a model, whether it should be transferred, whether it's doable, we had some reflection. Basically, it still represents a good strategy. There are some limits, and whatever the orientation, the political orientation, local communities and governments cannot make it in the absence of a material and political support from the state, at the state level. Riace has shown indeed that the political support is volatile, is not to be taken for granted. It can change over time, and this brings also a question of financing and so forth. So this is one reflection that we had from comparing the two case studies and wondering whether it's a transferable model and whether it should be at all. We also reflected that policies requires a broader state financing supported framework, which is respond also to the long term. Very often people working in the integration system complain that the projects are very short-term oriented and no one really knows what happens afterwards. So there should be a change also in terms of long-term engagements and finding of solutions. And the overall thing is also the depopulated areas themselves. The two case studies show that there is unemployment as the same context of peripherality, scarce development opportunities. So as long as the project goes, this is the case of Riace, you might see some results. But when the funding stops, then you go back to the local context, which is again unemployment and so forth. So these are some of the questions where a different policy, more innovative policy probably should come in. So just very briefly, the conclusions, something I've already mentioned. We found out that the results of integrating migrants into rural areas especially ultimately depend on pre-existing socioeconomic aspects, such as infrastructure, informal markets, the degree of perceived corruption, even it emerged in some of the material we got. So these aspects actually do affect policy implementation chances and sustainability in a dramatic way, I would say. Alleviating the insecurity brought by the population requires effective integration with other national and regional policies. I have mentioned this already. Then I can also say that overlooking the potential positive impact of migration in policy and political discourses occurs actually in continuity with the sense of marginalization that these territories already feel. So we saw it as a continuation. They are marginalized territories, and even when it comes to migration in the system, this happens in a sort of marginalized way when it comes to rural areas. This is also a finding that came out. And the last point is just a general point. We focused on Riace and Sjenica, but these cases, depopulation and rural areas, these are very crucial aspects for the future of Europe, the European Union and Europe at large. So it's an issue that I guess in many contexts can be found, and they require a common approach also elsewhere, basically. So that is very in short the aim of the contents of the article. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I forgot to present you. You are a postdoctoral research fellow at the Department of Political and Social Sciences at the University of Bologna. His research interests focus especially on migration and integration issues in Europe and across the Adriatic Ionian macro-region. He's currently involved in 3 international research projects, and he's the author of the forthcoming book, Futures of the Western Balkans, Fragmentation and Integration in the Region and Beyond. Thank you, Marco Zoppi. You touched upon my daily challenges. Thank you so much for putting it so clearly. There is a governance gap in between the central and the local level when it comes to migration policies and integration policies. Policies are decided at central level, but then they are implemented at local level without allowing the local level to have a say, to participate, to plan, and also to contribute in harnessing the potentialities, but also to addressing the challenges that come with the presence of migrants. Indeed, apparently there is the intention to keep already fragile territories in a fragile situation so that there is again a center periphery dynamics which can be pooled for different political objectives. And definitely my proposal to address the presence of migrants in the Western Balkans as a potential opportunity for the socioeconomic development of the region is very often challenged, but now apparently there may be a space for more discussion. And this allows me also to bring to the discussion the paper authored by Nermin Oruc, which I found incredibly fascinating. Are forced migrants more skilled? Because normally the usual narrative is, oh, these poor and unable people that they all migrate here in order to become parasite of our welfare system or assistance system or any kind of system we put in place. But apparently Nermin demonstrates in his paper this is not exactly the case, including in forced migration. So Nermin Oruc holds a PhD degree in economics from Staffordshire University. He's founder and director at the Center for Development Evaluation and Social Science Research. He's also the coordinator of the Western Balkans Migration Network. Nermin taught econometrics, economic development, and labor economics. He completed more than 90 national and regional research and consultancy projects. So really, Nermin, I would like to give you the floor in order to illustrate the findings of your paper. Nermin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you all can hear me. Great. Today I'm not presenting actually empirical part that could help Teresa and others, finding some specific solutions, but I think it's important to actually also raise the issue of methodological approaches and theoretical approaches to empirical analysis to the of phenomena such as forced migration. I'm not sure, just to confirm with Marco, are you sharing slides or I should do that? Okay, let me try to share the slides. I think it works. I hope you can all see it.
Yes, we can see them.
Yes, good. Let me just try to. Oh, sorry. Let me just try to. Sorry. Make it full screen. Yeah. So the theoretical model that was developed as part of my PhD thesis, afterwards empirically tested, was actually revised and updated for the purpose of a paper published in Southeast Europe Journal. Unfortunately, the events keep making this theoretical model current and important, and I thought that presenting this would be interesting topic for further discussion. So it's motivated by specific characteristics of conflicts, but also after being developed on based on qualitative research, it seems that can be tested and applied in case of displacement due to natural disasters and large development projects that actually share some of the common characteristics with displacement due to conflicts. Also, I believe that this theoretical contribution also is important for both analysis of brain drain or destruction of human capital in migration scholarly research, but also in the analysis of costs of conflict, because human capital is often neglected in assessing costs of conflict. So the model was based on qualitative research from ethnic cleansing in Bosnia, where we had interesting experiment, basically where almost half of population were displaced, and out of them, half of these displaced remain internally displaced, and other ones decided to go abroad. Analysis of which factors determine decision of displaced people to remain internally displaced or emigrate was motivation for developing this theoretical model and empirically testing it. And this was, say, a critical assessment and a challenge to models that are mainly applicable and used in analysis of voluntary migration. So the assumption was that certain amendments need to be made. So the qualitative research has actually shown that we have, in addition to risk as determinant of migration, in case of conflicts, also specific features in cases of large displacement, which is forced eviction, which makes migration process as a two-stage process where certain people, for example, are evicted and others are not, but those who are not evicted are also affected by, say, worsening of economic situation and risk factors due to the conflict in the country. After that, after this effect of eviction or change in environment, we have decisions of migration, whether to be internally displaced or whether to remain in the country or to decide to go abroad. The model is based on voluntary migration models and hypothesis of relative deprivation, where individuals compare their current situation to the situation to their position in the community. We also introduced, based on this characteristics of the displacement during conflict, so-called restoration hypothesis, where we believe that self-selection in case of forced migration can exist because those who are more highly skilled actually experience larger or more significant depletion of their or worsening of their position in the community, so they can have a stronger incentive to restore their previous position in the community, and for that reason emigrate abroad. For example, those who were better off before conflict, who are more skilled, may be less likely to accept situation or accept to remain in refugee camps. So this is why we may have a situation of so-called self-selection, or a situation where more highly skilled are, according to this theoretical model, more likely to emigrate abroad, and we have composition of migrants where a share of highly skilled is higher among these immigrants than in the total population from that country. So basically, the model was incorporated these relative deprivation hypothesis that was also included in voluntary migration models, but also this a novel restoration hypothesis, where in this two-stage process of migration, we have incentive to restore previous position, and another incentive that is reducing risk, where, say, previous models, so forced migration, we are primarily focused on risk reduction as a motive for forced migration, rather than this relative income position or incentive to restore their position. So basically, I won't go into details of this, just showing that Stark and Taylor's set of formulas in the model were adapted and amended according to previously identified characteristics of forced migration, where this relative deprivation restoration hypothesis plus risk were included in these formulas to actually adapt the model to be more appropriate and to reflect better characteristics of forced migration compared to voluntary migration. So the model as such, through these formula, predicts emigration as a function of initial level and change in absolute position, initial level and change in previous relative position, which means a restoration hypothesis. Each of these in two-stage process of emigration, and basically, according to these hypotheses, the model is set in such a manner that assumption whether those who are more skilled, more willing to restore their position, are more likely to emigrate. I won't go into particular details of empirical tests, but I'll just say that actually this model, in case of Bosnia, confirmed that this hypothesis exists, and confirms that individuals who were initially displaced and were more skilled were actually more likely to be international migrants, to move abroad, rather to be internally displaced. And something that I believe this model can open as possible questions for discussion. A motivation for the model as such: how is forced migration different from voluntary migration? Can we really use models of voluntary migration to explain forced migration, or we need to develop models such as this one presented here, that helps say that is tailored to specific characteristics and helps better understanding of the forced migration, and say the result in let's say expectations of empirical tests of this model, whether we really expect, based on these assumptions, forced migrants to be more likely to emigrate. And then once we have this theoretical contribution plus empirical contributions that can follow by using this model, how these findings can actually help us understand better and contribute to the literature of both forced migration and cause of conflict that should also include depletion of human capital. Thank you very much.
Nermin, absolutely, I fully agree. Already Alexander Betz, let's say, discussed and put in crisis, debated the division into voluntary and non-voluntary migration. So I fully align myself with your approach, which I definitely find extremely interesting and useful. From an empirical point of view, being one who has been displaced in refugee camps, I can confirm that those who are left behind and cannot move forward are the most vulnerable. Those who cannot really rely too much on a human capital or a social capital. So definitely I can confirm from my limited observatory that I could notice that the most skilled are those who want to continue their journey in order to replace the previous position they had in the community and in the country of origin. But in order to change the institutional landscape to embrace your complex theory, which would require a flexible institutional setting, we need to change the mindset of our society, because as Aristotle used to say, ubi societas ibi ius, where there is a social mentality, then the law is the product of that social background. And this also brings me to the last but not least paper from Marija Brujić, titled EU Trans Migrants in Belgrade as Agents of Europeanization from Below. Marija is a senior research associate at the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade, where she teaches anthropology of migration and anthropology of material culture. She was a visiting scholar at the University of Graz, Austria, and at the University of Amsterdam, Netherlands. So Marija describes how Belgrade is being transformed by the presence of EU trans migrants. And Marija, please give us a better understanding of what you mean by EU trans migrants in Belgrade. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to say that my research on EU migrants in Belgrade has very personal motives, because many of my friends would ask me, why don't you leave, or why didn't you leave already? So I was interested, who are these migrants from the EU who opted to live in Serbia? I was keen to understand if they can stay in Serbia, why shouldn't I? So in this paper today, I will shortly present you a paper on development potential among EU women trans migrants in Belgrade. Serbia is a Western Balkan EU candidate and a developing country with a high immigration rate and a high immigration potential as well, especially among the youth, as we already heard. This picture fits well into the most common migration pattern, which assumes migration to be from developing to developed countries and not vice versa. Focusing on Serbia, I will briefly outline whether EU migrants can be development actors in a Western Balkan country. In this respect, I conducted a long-term qualitative study on EU women living in Belgrade, which is part of a project Jean Monnet module Anthropology of the EU. There is a small number of EU citizens living in Serbia due to its high unemployment rate and low economic standards, except for refugees from former Yugoslav republics, IDPs from Kosovo, and transit and irregular migrants from North Africa and Asia on their way mainly to the EU countries. It is a common reference point that Serbia is not a popular immigration destination. As such, its migration policies aim to resolve the major problems concerning these types of migration. However, IOM's World Report on Migration from 2013 emphasize the possibilities of the developmental contributions of northern migrants in the south, such as reverse brain drain, creation of new linkages and networks across the borders, and financial and political resources. These possibilities I find applicable in Western Balkan countries as well. My interlocutors are relatively affluent and educated trans migrants who moved to Serbia mainly as part of household migration or for love. They all brought to Serbia, to use Meinhof and Triandafilidis' term, their transcultural capital, which is a result of their trans-migrant experiences. Trans-migrant is someone who moves and who stays in contact with several territories, with home country, and host society, as Mirjana Bobić already explained the term transnationalism. So it's similar to transnationalism, transmigrant or transnational migrants. And my findings show that by using their transcultural capital in Serbia, these women have the development potential to act as agents of Europeanization from below. In many aspects, EU integration and the Europeanization of the Balkans are top-down initiatives, thus perceived in Serbia and in some other Western Balkan countries as imposed processes of Western political control, which is often met with resistance, resentment, and Euroscepticism. On the other hand, I propose Europeanization from below the Balkans as an alternative process of positive development changes, which at the same time have the capacity not to be aligned with the Western control and the corresponding Balkan subordination. These women have tried in various cases to induce changes in their local society and to implement norms and values from their societies or places they have lived before. For example, by trying to organize a school trip to a local eco-shoe manufacturer, by participating in school reforms, by pushing forward the idea of Oriental dance as an elite dance, by explaining people how to queue, and by helping irregular migrants in Belgrade and so on. These examples demonstrate that they have ideas as well as initiatives to use their transcultural capital in Serbia. However, in many cases, they were unsuccessful because they have not been recognized by the local authorities. In Serbian migration policies, as well as in other related documents, voluntary middle-class migrants from developed countries are not recognized as potential source for the transfer of transcultural capital. These documents pay attention to returnees, diaspora, potential migrants, and refugees, and consequently ignore the possibilities of migrants' participatory role in Serbian society. However, if these types of foreign initiatives in Serbia were recognized by the state and supported as a form of mutual dialogue, cooperation, and influence between a local community and a migrant or a group of migrants, they could also act as strategic generators of Europeanization from below. In conclusion, there is a significant chance that their impact might not be interpreted as Western imposition, but rather that it might have a positive influence. In this manner, it would be possible to avoid the negative public perception of Europeanization as a tool of Western domination in the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brujić. Indeed, I have other witnesses for you to interview. I have more than one Italian friend, and male, by the way, not only women, who live partially their lives in Belgrade. And I was there recently, and I can understand why some people would like to stay in Belgrade from the European Union and not just pass through. So it may be, and I'm sure it will, a perspective in the near future. So now it's time to give the floor to the discussants. Who are the discussants? These should be nasty people. No, I'm kidding. They are not nasty, but they are. They have been entrusted with putting questions and discussing what the speakers have just explained and illustrated. So I would like now to give the floor to Danica Šantić, who is Associate Professor at the University of Belgrade, Faculty of Geography, Department of Human Geography, with strong interest in migration topics. She gives lectures on the migration issues at the levels of bachelor, master, and PhD. Her scientific and research interests in the migration field are from internal and outward migration to forced migration in the Balkan migration route. She was involved in several projects and she's an active member of the Western Balkans Migration Network and other associations of researchers. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Danica so that she can pose her questions to the speakers.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you all authors that they give us a brief overview of their papers. In line with the title of this webinar, I would say good afternoon from Zagreb, because Balkan is always on the move. So also the researchers who are dealing with migration should be on the move in order to understand what is happening with migration. And I have a lot of questions, but I will not be a nasty author. I will just try to summarize some important things that were pointed out during the presentation of authors. And I just remember one maybe funny thing that recently every webinar or conference online about migration is starting that with a sentence that migrations are age-old phenomenon. So we are just reminding ourselves that it's not started from 2015, it's not new, but obviously it's touching almost every society, and it's they have changed in important ways. So we heard a lot of topics even today that are dealing with different types of migration, and then they're constantly change even in Balkan. So I will just refer to the sentence that Professor Anna mentioned in her article. She mentioned that Professor King said for Albania that Albania is a laboratory for the study of migration, and I would just spread it to the whole region of Balkan, a real laboratory with very, very various topics. I can just say a few things that I just write down while I was reading your articles, and I think that even today you showed all the authors that they are important. First of all, the migration data. So very important topic because if we don't have data, at least if we do not know the trends, how should we make efficient policy toward any type of migration? The other thing is narrative. Well, this negative narrative, which is maybe predominant, should be changed into the positive narrative. And I remember that was the topic of International Migrants Day in Vienna in 2018, if I'm correct, Teresa. The OECD just put this in the first row and just highlighted that the positive narrative is something that should be connected with migration and connected with migration development nexus. So we heard a lot of things about what is connection between migration and development, but also which I consider very important is that irregular migration, it started to be perceived as the kind of migration that could be incorporated in this nexus. The local economies in Serbia, for example, are very much dependent of money that irregular migrants are leaving in those municipalities. And next week, I was conducting the field work in the north part of Serbia, in the border of Hungary and Romania, and we really saw that the local economies have their very it's a positive role to local economies. And one respondent in a local store, local market, told us that they will probably shut down the store when migrants leave, because the depopulation are present in the village and they will not have anyone to buy the products. So definitely migration fostering development. And since we mentioned depopulation in this area, it is a very important topic, and we are very often wondering how can we just make this reverse trend that Teresa mentioned, and how can we, or if we can find a solution for depopulation processes. And tomorrow it's event in Serbian government. It's related to depopulation, and it's the first roundtable with specific demographic issues, and it's organized by UNDP and UNFPA. I mentioned these organizations because we heard what Teresa's organization is doing here in Serbia, and we have a lot of international organizations working here, and sometimes I think that they all have the same issue and the same topics, but we hardly, can connect their results, or they don't know what the others are doing, and that is very, very interesting here in Serbia. So the mapping of diaspora is subject number one, and you can hear that IOM is doing mapping, the GIZ doing mapping, that those some other organizations doing mapping, but just separately. Also, I have to say that these measures, or this, how should I say, governmental documents should be pointed to a local level. That is crucial, and I think that intention here in Serbia is, at least in recent months, that it should be pointed out to the local governments, and just building their capacity through some education roundtables, examples of best practice, etc., should just give the strength for this municipalities to dealing with the issues in its territories. So a lot of things is going on really here in Serbia, and I know that the similar situation is in the region, in Western Balkans, and I guess that with better insight of migration topic, I think that even the policies could be better. I will just mention briefly the strategy, economic migration strategy, which was adopted in 2020. It's not the best document in the world. It's not the document that would solve all our problems, but it conducts some good things toward diaspora, returning, circular migration, internal migration, the migration data, and as Teresa mentioned in the introduction, about the whole atmosphere in the country, which will be very important for people not to plan their journey abroad and to plan their emigration. So I would just ask for the start 2 questions. I don't know how much of the time do we have. First of all, I was the paper connecting Sjenica and Riace was very interesting for me, and I was wondering, Marko, you already told us, but just we have in Serbia maybe municipalities that are more similar to Riace than Sjenica, and why did you choose it? Because we have next to Sjenica is Tutin, probably you know that, and I think it's a smaller municipality, and maybe you can in your further investigation and research you can just show the case of Tutin, or even we have municipality of Bosilegrad. It's on east. It's with the Bulgarian majority, and they also have the reception center for migrants and the integration there, and not the integration, we don't have still the integration of those migrants on Balkan migration route, but just the connection with migrants is very good. And they said that they just always said on media or on some meetings, if you have more migrants, just send it to us. We need workforce, we need babies, we need everything, because, you know, like we need economic development. That is my first question. And yes, I just I wanted to thank Professor Anna, because I saw that she used the MIGREC deliverable for some data about migration on Balkan. So since I'm involved in this project, and I was involved also in writing this report, it was like very nice for me to see that someone is reading that, and you know that could be useful for writing the papers and for some further researchers. So I guess that only Marco has a question for the moment.
Okay, Marco, if you allow me, now that we have collected the first question, thank you, Danica, I would like to give the floor to the second discussant so that we collect all the questions. So please, Marco, keep in mind and remember the question, why did you choose Sjenica? And then I would like to give the floor to Marco Borraccetti, PhD, Associate Professor of European Union Law of the Alma Mater Studiorum University of Bologna, School of Political Science, where he teaches EU institutional law and EU immigration law. He's Rector's Delegate for International Agreements and Network and for University Corridor for Refugees. Oh, this is very interesting. Marco, you are now in my radar. You will no longer escape from it. So his main research interests include migration, trafficking in human beings, and human rights. So Marco, please give us your questions for the speakers.
So thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. But I apologize. I don't know if I have questions. I am more comment. And from the comment, then you will be able, if you want, to comment to the comments again. I will use, I think, 3 minutes. Because I apologize, but at around 5:20, I have a meeting for the university corridors or better, for the management of arrival of Afghan students. So it's not my agenda, it's agenda someone else, but I will be there until then. First of all, I want to thank a lot Anna Krasteva and Marco Zoppi and Marco Puleri, because Anna Krasteva invited me as a discussant to this seminar, and Marco Zoppi and Marco Puleri shared with me the 2 issues of the journal, and I found it extremely interesting. I found it extremely interesting because of the different type of contributions. I found very interesting because I am a lawyer and there are no legal issues. So that's why it was something interesting. And well, I have some questions. And what I was doing is that I found as the French says, a fil rouge that is connecting different articles, also from different the 2 different issues. For example, I found very interesting and connected with the fil rouge with other 2 or 3, let's say, contribution, the article Forced Migrants More Skilled ? by Nermin and his team, Professor Jackson, Professor Puth. And what is interesting is, in my opinion, the the approach, not only for a different model, but is also because the reasoning is speaking about brain drain versus brain gain. And in my opinion, it is important to stress that in this situation, when the migrants are going to another country or are moving, if we see from a positive perspective, it is not only for them, but is also for the country of arrival or the countries of arrival, and also for their country. So sometimes we are so obsessed to speak about migration as a policy in which we want to find the obstacle to people to come, that we are not able to understand that if we remove the obstacle, maybe we will create more circulation. So what the European Union itself is calling circular migration or temporary migration. What is the difference? That without obstacles, sometimes we are, or better not sometimes, but without obstacles, we will put in migrant in the position to choose. Putting obstacle, we are forcing them to stay somewhere, or to try to find an escape to go somewhere else. This is the message that arrives to the different article in my opinion contribution on skill migration. And I tell you, the comment of brain drain versus brain gain is a question of interest of all the countries involved from the first contribution. The idea of putting obstacles or removing obstacles it came from the contribution from Professor Bobić that is also an interest. It gave me an interesting perspective that so I cannot say young people and adult, but young generation, old generation, they have a different approach of migration. Young generation see migration as also an idea to change, to see the world, to go somewhere else and then to come back. And then again, the other one that had already their opportunities, they are stopping them. Think about it. Then I found interesting that in the two issues, we have the two sides of the same coin, let's say, because the skilled youth migration from Serbia and the EU transmigrant in Belgrade, in my opinion, are the perfect two sides of the same coin. So there are people that are moving, there are others that are going, and it is extremely interesting to read, comparing it at the same, almost at the same time. The question is to Marija is what do you mean with transmigrants? Because really that would be interesting to explore not new categories, but on how we can dismantle categories that are always limiting us. Some more comments? I tell you that in the reading the article of Mirjana Ražević, my thought I saw in her reasoning on migration, a catalyst to of Serbia development, something that happened in all our countries. If I think I'm coming from the northeast of Italy, and I tell you that northeast Italy, that now is one of the richest part of the country, was extremely poor in the 50s, 60s, and thanks to the migrants and the emigrant and the immigrant, so some people that left the country and they were sending money, but at the same time, some others going in the country and working there, where they contributing to the development on the country. So I think that is something common to all the European countries. And what Marian Petrovskis wrote, the question was if under the matter was about diaspora contribution to new North Macedonia development, not only what I just said, but also the question if underutilization is also because it's a voluntary act, not only because sometimes people are not able to stress or to use the important contribution of some other people, but also I was thinking that maybe it could be a voluntary act by the people, politicians, but also stakeholders living in the country, because they have a fear that using a contribution from someone that is from outside, that could change the mentality and the position of power in the country. Last comment, last article is from Jovan and Marco. I didn't want to, I found it very interesting, but you know, we are from the same department. With Marco, we are working almost every day. It was slightly strange for me to contribute, to comment what I saw, and I remember when he was writing it, but I found it very interesting, and I would stress the importance of soft action as the exchange of best practices. And I tell you, and that is the end, the final comment, I tell you that this could be the real revolutionary approach, because sometimes we are not able to understand that someone else already had the same experience in the same situation, and they already find the solution. So come on, we are not in a master thesis defense where plagiarism is forbidden. In this situation, copying and sending information to each other is the real added value. So thanks a lot to all of us, to all of you, sorry, thanks a lot to all of you. And I found all the contribution extremely interesting. And to Teresa, I think we will see each other very soon.
Very soon.
In the former capital of the empire.
So, Marco, it would be so interesting for you to learn that I organized an exhibition on Riace here in Vienna, the former capital of the empire, at the Italian Cultural Institute, exactly in order to inspire a number of countries, and particularly the countries where I am currently working: Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Italy, Austria, and Germany, because we all share the same challenge of depopulating areas, young people migrating. Hey, welcome to the developed world. We in Italy will lose 100,000 young people every year. Do they go all to Germany? Maybe yes, maybe not. But before giving the floor to MB, Marco Borraccetti, I suppose, who raised his hand, but before him, Marija Brujić was raising her hand, I need to give the floor to Marco Zoppi to reply to the initial question. Why? Why did you choose Snienica?
Sjenica.
Snienica, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. I can be very brief, actually. It came out simply as a research opportunity because my co-author, Dr. Masilovic, was actually already experiencing in the region, and she had contacts. So after a conversation that we had on the theme of depopulation and local development, we actually realized that we had these two opportunities for comparison. She was also very interested in the case of Riace. And that's how the idea came about. I totally agree that there are other municipalities and areas that have even more difficult situations. This comes for Serbia, but comes from Italy and the rest of Europe. So there are plenty of opportunities for comparison, and as Marco was saying, also for policy exchange and joint discussions on solutions on areas that have undertaken, social innovation policies or whatever kind of initiatives. So this is my short answer. I hope it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. If I can further comment on this, we in Italy, we are sufficiently lucky in order to have many underdeveloped area. So welcome to the village I come from, in the middle of Sardinia, which is an absolute depopulated island in the middle of the sea, in the middle of nowhere. There are more sheep than humans. So, like in New Zealand, by the way. So, I see another hand raised.
Yes,
A
I think
person
it's
from
yeah. Sorry, I think it's Mirjana was
Yeah.
first. Okay?
Yes, because I cannot see the names of the people.
Sorry, I think that Marija maybe was before me. I'm not quite sure if Marija Brujić was before me, and then I will
MB,
follow.
yes, MB. I believe it's Mirjana Bobić. Yes, Mirjana, the floor is yours.
Is it me or Marija Grujić? Marija Brujić.
Sorry. So,
There is two MB. There's two initials with MB. I think
True.
Marija has the precedence over me.
So please, the first MB takes the floor.
Thank you.
Yes.
I didn't raise a hand, but I can answer a question, which I can answer a question about trans migrants, if you would like, and then Mirjana can ask or discuss her ideas. Well, trans migrant is a scholarly term. It's used in sociology and anthropology. It's a shorter term for transnational migrant. It's for people who lead bifocal lives, who speak several languages, including language of their host society. All of my interviewees speak Serbian very well, and in fact, I spoke with them in Serbian. I only spoke with the English interviewee and German interview women in their native languages, and it was because of me to practice my foreign languages, and not because of them. It's used for people who live in between, and they would all say, "Well, I don't belong to Serbia, but I don't belong to Austria either." I would see changes. And I explain why they are transmigrant. Transmigrant is a concept which is usually used for migrants with in lower economic position, and these women are all highly educated and well off. Many of them are well off. And in one of my previous articles, I explained why are they transmigrants, and it's called "There's No Place Like Home." It's published in two homelands. But this term transmigrants, it's not invented by me. It's frequently used in migration studies, especially in anthropology and sociology. So I just wanted to be short and sweet because I will have to leave in 5 or 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Marija.
Thank you for your question and time.
Thank you so much, Marija. I share with Marco Borraccetti the, let's say, fatigue for categories, because we are both from a legal perspective. I am an attorney myself, but I find that the more we develop categories, the more maybe we are missing something. But in this case, I must say that I fully understand this category because I am surrounded by Serbian and other young people who grew up actually in other countries. Vienna is the home of many international organizations. So very often children of international civil servants like me, they grew up in different countries, and actually they don't know who they are because there is nowhere that they can call home. So home is a concept at the end of the day in this globalized world. And on this, my very personal experience, I would like to give the floor to Mirjana.
Yes, now, now there is a lot of things that were actually touched upon, but I will refrain myself only to two issues that inspired me. First, about this transnational migrant. That's really a big area of research, of theoretical reconsiderations, and so on. I'm very prone to accept something what Phoenix and Collier wrote in one of their recent books on integration, that actually temporary migrations are something which are similar to transmigrants, because many of the experiences of transmigrants show that they're actually not quite satisfied either with the integration in the destination countries in terms of not only economic one, having a good position, being well accepted into the host country, having a good career, payment and so on, but something more than that, something which is overcoming of overarching in terms of feeling at home, a way of home, whether it is realized or not. So many of our transmigrants, speaking about the reasons why they decided to shift their businesses to Serbia, many of the reasons were that they were not happy, they couldn't reconciliate their family and business life, for example, in US or other highly competitive economies. And living in Serbia and being among their countrymen gave some additional value to their personal lives, especially for those who wanted to be also familiar people, not only business people. That's that. Then there is a lot of other things, but I will now refrain from further addressing this issue, which is really big and which requests for grounded theory research. We can't only speak on the basis of ground theories, but we have to go deeper into the ground, into the field researches. The other thing which colleague who posed the question to me and actually mentioned me was about the generations. I'm not quite sure that I can accept that argument, maybe partially. If we speak about the older and the younger generations, you have the new paradigm of so-called new economic of labor migrations, which is actually the household strategy that recruits one of the persons to go abroad who is probably more educated or goes for some additional education, training, and so on. And by way of sending him abroad or her abroad, because more and more women are uptaking these positions, they kind of diversify their economic, their resources portfolio, and the money which is earned abroad helps with those who are left behind in terms of their education, health, social system, then I don't know, improvement in their production, agriculture, and so on and so on. So it's not quite correct. I think that generations even make some contract when it comes to migrations, that even they support each other. The other problem is, like I know one of my friends from my high school, the other problem is that those high professionals, professor at Cornell University, other one living in Australia, they left homes and left their older elderly at home, and now there is the issue of caring. And that's something which maybe opens up the questions of the growing necessity of, uptaking the care of those who left. That is maybe something which opens up new discussions. But on the other hand, that's again, sometimes people say, well, why don't you import immigrants who can help in households, in chores, about the elderly, about the children, and so on. So the issue is quite complex, let's say. So it would be my short answer to what the colleague put as a question, inspired by my talk.
Thank you, Mirjana. Indeed, aging societies. Italy is the oldest country in the world, as you know, together with Japan, but also Israel. Definitely, and unfortunately, because of the reduced welfare system, the progressive reduction of welfare services, we have to resort to migrant workers in order to support the aging societies, those who are left behind by you know, this intergenerational dynamics, which is no longer staying in the same place. So I think we can conclude this meeting, if you don't mind, because I understand that we already went beyond the timing allotted for this meeting, which also is an indicator that the discussion was so interesting that that everyone wanted to have a say. So I hope Anna and Marco and SEEU, this is a good indicator of the fact that you developed extremely interesting articles, and I can confirm from my side that you actually are going to give me so much theoretical knowledge to ground my, let's say, dreams that I call projects. So I wish to thank you so much, and I wish to thank all the participants to this event. And I wish to encourage you to get connected via LinkedIn to Southeastern Europe to read all these articles, because they provide a wealth of knowledge which is unexpected. And I say it from, let's say, if you allow me, from an expert point of view, because I have been dealing with migration in the last 25 years, and actually I read pretty many products, and I must say these are really particularly interesting. Anna, the guest, I see that, yes, Anna, please.
I wanted to comment, but of course not after the conclusion, so that thanks for the floor. I will use it just to thank you very much, Teresa, for the wonderful moderation, so insightful, so sensitive, bringing, really contributing, co-authoring the articles, because building this connection to policy making in a very, very relevant and systematic way, so that it was a real contribution also to the articles, but also, of course, to the debate. And I would like also to thank Marco Zoppi for the excellent organization, hosting, sending emails, etc., etc. It is, and being author at the same time, and editorial assistant at the same time. So that thank you very much. So that and of course I would like also to thank all the authors who committed themselves first, let's say, to share their ideas with the journal, and then to participate in the debate, and to say that those who did not manage, it is because of other international commitments which have been scheduled before the debate. And so probably Marco could say that the debate would be published. So please, Marco, you have the final words if you want, for the continuation of this debate.
Yes, exactly, the continuation. But also want to thank you, all the authors, all the participants. Thank you, Teresa, for a wonderful moderation through the various themes and articles. And yes, the video will be uploaded on the social channels of the journal. It will be possible to watch every single presentation or all the events all together. So let's say a technical time to prepare the whole thing, and then it will be uploaded. Thank you.
Thank you. So nice holidays, and stay in touch. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.